Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 35 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Karl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and of course, the host of this podcast. If you're watching on video, you'll see I have filled in the little job title white bubble beneath my name. So in case you are unsure of the fact who is hosting this podcast, it is definitely me. But I am, of course, joined, as always, by my colleague, lead cloud engineer at Logicata, Jon Goodall. How are you doing today, Jon?
I'm okay. Can't complain.
I see you're back on the DIY, according to your little white speech bubble there. What's been going on in the world of do-it-yourself for you?
Yeah, that's not my job title. That's well, I'd call that more of a vocation rather than paid employment. My extractor fan packed itself in over the weekend, so I spent several hours ripping the old one out and ripping out lots of old ducting and sealing vents up whilst I order some new kit. And then I'm going to have to spend many hours this coming weekend running new ducting, going up the outside of my house, putting in new vent covers, wiring in the new one, wiring it in properly so it's on the correct circuitry. And, I'm going to have to get the knee pads out or something because I'm going to be right over in the eaves of the house. It's going to be awful. Not looking forward to it.
And a mask, of course. You don't want to be inhaling any of the loft insulation fibers.
Yeah, because I have a house from the 60s and the insulation is all fiberglass, so I don't want to breathe that in.
Yeah, I think what's left of mine is fiberglass. Lots of it seems to be missing. Probably ought to address that at some point, but there we are. Anyway, we're not here to talk about DIY, despite Jon's little title there on the screen. As regular listeners to the podcast will know, we are here to talk about AWS news. Once a week, I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter. And then Jon and I, or Jon, in fact, picks a selection of the articles that we'd like to talk about with our guest. But as you may have noticed, we don't have a guest this week. So it'll just be me and Jon talking about the articles that Jon has selected to discuss. So the first of those articles this week is an article from the AWS Cloud Financial Management blog, and the title is Introducing Budget Controls for AWS, Automatically Manage Your Cloud Costs. So budget's obviously something that we work with on a regular basis with our customers, Jon. So what's actually new here? Because there is something being introduced. So what's new?
Well, it's not a new service. It's one of those prescriptive guidance solution things that they've put together. It's not, I always get really annoyed when they say introducing such and such, and it's not a service. It's introducing, here's a thing that we built that's not native in the console. And that annoys me. But what this is quite a clever little architecture that allows you to take some automated action in response to budget alarms. And AWS, generally speaking, not just within cost, but within various other things as well, has had a bit of a push for, can you automate your way around alerts? So the example I like to use and that we've spoken about internally several times is, do we need to wake people up because a service has gone down, or is that something that we can have a machine fix and not wake someone up? Can you extend a disk automatically? Can you clear some space up by clearing out Windows event logs? Can you do something like that and not have to wake somebody up because something's keeled over? And this is in the same sort of vein. This is why I think it's quite interesting, because budgets is a thing that we do. We, as part of our landing zone product, we create and set budgets. We do that per account. We do that for the organization. And everybody should be doing that as part of their just general good practice setup, right? If you don't have a budget set in your AWS account, what are you doing? I think it's even now something that they walk you through when you create a new account as part of the changes of the free tier. I think they walk you through it, or they give you some extra money for creating a budget or something like that, because
That's
it's
right,
really
extra
something
credits,
that that's the one, because it's really something that you should be doing. So, earn your extra $20 on your free tier and set some budgets up. This is just taking that a step further. So the architecture is a little bit complicated, but there's budgets, and then there's config and EventBridge, and there's Dynamo and a step function. And I like a step function. It's, I'm on record repeatedly saying I like a step function. So I'm going to say it again, I like a step function, and various other bits and pieces. And because obviously it has SageMaker in there as well, because you need some AI in, I think, everything these days, although it's not Bedrock. So,
Yeah, I did notice it's not Bedrock.
Yeah, interesting. It might be because it wants to train itself on your own data or something like that without using RAG, potentially. That's why they've done that. I don't know. But what it's doing, you've got a budget set up, and then you've got a number of tags across various things. And the tag options, as it says at the start here, is inform, stop, and terminate. And that's when a budget is consumed, do the thing, right? So when your budget for this service or your overall budget or whatever has hit a certain threshold, you can, anything tagged up as inform, just tell me about it, right? Tell me about it. Tell me about these things. Or you could stop it. And if that's a resource that you can stop, because you can't stop an S3 bucket, you can't stop a NAT gateway. And NAT gateways are usually responsible for quite a lot of spend. But you can stop RDS instances, you can stop Aurora, you can stop EC2s, Redshift clusters, those kinds of things. You can stop them. And it might be appropriate that we've gotten to the, to the 20th of the month, and that's just been left running by accident, and we've just hit a budget. Stop it, and we'll worry about it later because we don't use it very much. That might be appropriate. And then the third is terminate, which is, again, it's a bit big hammer, but it's this service has consumed its entire budget for the month, and we do not have any money in any other pots that we can spend on it. We don't really need it, so you can just kill it. When we run out of money for the month, kill it. Or we're using IAC, and it's reasonably easy for us to recreate these things, so you can just kill it rather than turning it off, because that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do if you can recreate it. So I think this is really cool. There's a whole CloudFormation stack that they've put together. It's in a GitHub repo. Go look at it. It's quite nice. And it works. It works really well. There's a lot of extras in here that you probably don't need. So there's config and EventBridge and various functions that read from those things. And that's to make sure that your tags are set properly. So you probably don't need those bits, and config's quite expensive. But it's a good thing to have in place. I haven't quite worked out what SageMaker is doing, though, having kind of only skim read this. But it's a really interesting concept, and it's a really interesting idea of rather than what a lot of people do with the budgets, you set a budget, you get an alert, you go and look at it yourself and work out what you need to do, is you do that kind of work up front, and you say, with this budget, you can take those actions, and you predefine those. And that's a really interesting kind of turning it on its head. And it's also saying that what you're doing is you're able to, you're setting budgets for specific services rather than just, my account spend is 10 grand. It's that's what it's talking about SageMaker, because it's talking about SageMaker resources, and they're an excellent way of spending money you don't need. So you can sort of say, if my SageMaker budget has run out, go kill my workspaces. That's what that's talking about. So it's a really interesting concept, really interesting idea of sort of turning the whole thing on its head, so that things just happen automatically rather than, I've had a budget alert, I'll go and look at it.
Sounds good. I had actually figured out the SageMaker piece myself, but you've already answered the question that you asked. So there we go. Yeah, that's the four things at the bottom of the diagram are the resources that can be controlled by this solution. EC2, SageMaker, Aurora, and OpenSearch at the time of writing, which is fairly recently, I think, 5th of September. It's not actually doing anything AI-wise, just controlling your AI infrastructure. How do we notify budget alerts?
Email.
But how does what triggers the email?
So the ones that we have in our kind of landing zone by default is I haven't had that for a while. Cat walking across the screen. What we have is we have kind of two as our defaults, and they're fairly robust. We don't do per service, because as a kind of a generic, that's quite hard to do, because most people aren't using SageMaker. You're not going to have everybody using EC2, for instance. We have customers that are entirely container based, or have lots and lots and lots of Lambdas and not a lot of EC2 or whatever. We have lots of customers that aren't using OpenSearch, because a PHP app doesn't need OpenSearch typically. So that's not something we have deployed. Our normal setup is both organization level and account level total spend. We have anomaly detection, which I would like to see this integrated with as well, because the anomaly detection is pretty good. And again, it's your normal spend in this service is X, but if you go a certain percentage or a certain value or both over your normal daily spend, raise an alert. And again, we get emailed about them, and that works for us because it's a broad enough pool of what is and isn't acceptable that the little bit of ML that we get from the anomaly detection works quite nicely. Plus, we can just kind of manage normal budgets. But, this is certainly something to start looking at, because lots of people do use EC2, so it might be something to consider integrating.
Yeah, I noticed that one of the actions is not increase the budget, which is often what we end up doing. Anyway. Cool. Well, let's take a look at our second article for this week. This is an article from the AWS database blog, and it's all about data consistency with AWS DMS Data Resync. DMS, of course, standing for Database Migration Service. So what's Data Resync, John?
What do you think it is, Karl?
Well, I could guess, but there wouldn't be much point of me asking the question. Yeah. So obviously, database migration service we're using a fair bit at the moment for customer migrations, and I can hazard a guess at what data resync might be, but I think you're probably better placed to explain it than I am.
So it is kind of what you think it is, to be really honest, but
Is it a Ron Seal approach to AWS blog post
pretty
naming?
much, yeah. Weird. I like it when that happens. But it only supports a certain number of database engines, because it doesn't support all of them. Like, it doesn't support MySQL, for instance, and that's quite irritating. But what this is doing is, so let me start that again. When you have a database migration project outside of DMS, typically what you would do is you would dump it in one place and you would restore it in another. Yeah, quite normal. That needs downtime. And, so you can have data consistency in your source. And depending on how big the database is, that could be hours to days. I have genuinely had database dump and imports that have taken a whole day to dump and several days to import. They take longer to import than they do to dump, because more gets read, more happens. But yes, multiple days is entirely within the realm of possibility. So what do you do? Well, you use something like DMS, and DMS does that for you. It uses its own kind of special source, but it does it again using the native technology, so PG dump or MySQL dump or whatever. And it does the dump, it does the restore for you. It gives you a nice GUI, and it kind of does all that for you. Cool. That still doesn't solve the downtime problem. The downtime problem is solved by replication. And what that does is you do your dump and restore, and then you say to the target, you are a replica instance, and these used to have problematic names, but now they're called replicas. And your primary node is that one over there. Here's where you were replicated from. Here's the kind of point in time. Go catch yourself up. And it will go, oh, cool. Go off and run relevant queries in MySQL world, which is what I'm more familiar with. It reads the bin logs, the binary logs, and says, okay. And then it'll apply all the transactions, and it'll catch itself up. Brilliant. And typically it does that really, really, really quickly. So you could be several days behind, and it will catch it up in a couple of hours. It'll just go vroomp and catch up, because it doesn't hang around. However, this is a fragile process if you have people that have write access to the target. So if you have write access to the target, and you shouldn't in a read replica, because that's what these are. This is how RDS and Aurora read replicas work. It's the same concept. Is you could, in theory, overwrite something that replication then tries to write over, and you can have like ID conflicts and that kind of thing, particularly on auto numbers, because I'm trying to do an insert because it was an insert, and I can't insert because I'm trying to insert this particular value, and it's not letting me because it's already there, right? And replication breaks. It just goes and stops, because it doesn't know how to handle that, and it's not going to go and do something that could cause data inconsistency. The data's already inconsistent, and it's just gone, I give up. And you have to go and fix it. And that's what this is talking about, is historically, you had to go and fix it. And how do you do that? Well, with DMS, you just restart it and it will redump everything. And that is okay on smaller setups, but on particularly big ones, like you see in what they're talking about here, is Oracle or SQL Server going to Postgres, and they could be big. That's not necessarily acceptable, because you don't have the time, or you don't want to spend all the money, because you have, data transfer charges and whatever to worry about. Resync basically just fixes the broken bits using, as far as I can work out, witchcraft. I don't understand how it's working, but I know it's really, really cool.
Cool. So do you think we'll see it supporting other engines, or is it less relevant for the other engines due to the sort of scale that those databases
Yeah, I don't know. So MySQL and MariaDB, the open source version of MySQL, since Oracle actually own MySQL and no one wants to kind of use that anymore, they can get really big. Typically, the ones that I've seen are smaller. Like the big databases are SQL Server and Oracle SQL, and they are by and large moving to Postgres, because ironically, given that Oracle own MySQL, I think that was just Oracle bought the project more than anything. They do align better in terms of their schemas and how they lay things out and how things work. So it's much more relevant for that ecosystem. I'd love to see it in the MySQL ecosystem. I really, really would, because having to restart things and, taking ages and ages is not ideal. Whether it will come or not, I don't know. I think there's a difference in how the replication is done that might make that more challenging for MySQL, but it is what it is.
Well, watch this space. If you're Oracle or SQL to Postgres, you can use Data Resync. If you're not, watch this space for future developments. On that note, let's move along to our third article for this week. This is an article from the Networking and Content Delivery blog, all about how Amazon CloudFront now supports IPv6 origins for end-to-end IPv6 delivery, which is fantastic. But is anybody actually using IPv6 yet?
Yeah. Everybody should be. You should be as much as humanly possible. This is also interesting because I think the pricing is different for IPv6 egress. I think the pricing's slightly cheaper.
More cheaper. Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So this is so it's one of those big kicks in the teeth for someone's bottom line, because you can go IPv6 only and save a bunch of money. But yes, so they talk about pricing. They don't talk about pricing in this one, but the kind of the full benefits that the article outlines are quite prescient anyway, right? The first one is no natting. It's much better because you could just pass all the way through and you don't have to translate from v4 to various, internals, externals, and all the rest of it. And it just removes a bunch of hops, so you don't need them anymore. I don't imagine we're going to see lots of people doing straight pass through IPv6, holding lots of things as they go through. Not yet, because it's still, IPv6 isn't new, but it's still new in terms of forced adoption and availability of adoption. So good, yes, generally. Lower latency is great. And mobile first market, again, as the article calls out, is IPv6 adoption is very, very high by comparison, because it has to be, just because of the sheer number of devices and things. It talks about other bits and pieces as well in terms of packet processing, because again, you're not having to do lots of things with it, and predictable transmission and congestion control, which goes right into the whole content delivery piece that I don't really understand, but podcast friend Stephen Sennett might do, because he was once a content delivery community builder before he was absconded into the hero program. So he might know more than I do. And then higher connection scalability, which that one is very true, right? I don't know what the numbers are, but it's orders of magnitude higher in terms of number of IPs that you can support on an IPv6 namespace compared with IPv4, right? Because more octets, and it uses, I forget the name of it now. It uses base 16, hex, that's the one, hexadecimal for its addressing as well, rather than just numbers. So it's just bigger and better and generally good. I'm a little bit annoyed that it's taken this long, though, because, again, you couldn't have an IPv6 only CloudFront distro, so you had to pay for some public IPs again. And this is one of those, when they announced the whole, you're going to have to pay for public IPv4s in about a year's time, we were quite bullish about it and going, it'll be fine because everything will kind of be over by then. It won't cost you anything. And then a year later, and one service had supported IPv6 only operation. So it's good. It's good that it's coming. It's good that it's come along. And it will drop your costs in that regard, because you won't have to pay for IPv4s anymore. But why is it taking so bleeding long? I'm sure there's really complicated engineering there, and that's why. But it just feels like we've been paying for 18 months now for IPv4s. Pull your finger out. Get up with it.
Any downsides to going IPv6 only?
No.
For the distribution? No?
Not really. Not that I can think of. There might be the odd one. Well, there might be the odd one if you're talking to really esoteric clients and things, that, or really old clients or government networks potentially, that don't support IPv6 addressing. But I'd like to think those sorts of use cases are few and far between, and the people that have them have the money to pay for it.
Fair enough. Well, there we go. IPv6 origins for end-to-end IPv6 on CloudFront. Sorry, my screen briefly went off there for a moment as my beer fridge compressor cut out. Still haven't sorted that particular technical problem out, but my beer is cold, so it's not all bad. On that, let's move along to our fourth article for this week. And this is an article on the server side, all about Fargate versus ECS, the difference between running containers in Fargate and ECS. And I think it's a little bit misleading as a title, isn't it? Because you still run ECS on Fargate. Fargate is just a capacity provider for ECS. So, I'm not really sure of the point of this article.
I think it's to highlight that point, because if you go and talk to someone that's not quite so au fait with the container landscape, you say, "I'll just run that on Fargate." No, you can't run it on Fargate. You need to pick between ECS and EKS, because you still need to have it in a way that's consumable by something. And as you say, Fargate is just a capacity provider. And I don't think people are necessarily, up to speed on that if you don't live in this ecosystem. And equally, it might very well just be to drive some clicks between, here's some keywords and we need to get some traffic to go through our site.
So are there any interesting observations in it?
No, not really. It's not wrong about anything, because if you look at the comparison table at the bottom, it says ECS is a container orchestration service and Fargate is a serverless compute engine. Yep. And ECS manages placement, networking, scaling, and monitoring. Fargate runs them without you having to worry about servers. Yep. The next piece is a little bit iffy, because it says ECS runs on EC2 instances that you manage. No, it runs on EC2 instances that you manage, or on Fargate provided kit that you don't manage. So that's a little bit kind of dodgy. Integration options. It then it then says works with EC2 and Fargate. Okay. So it's, as you say, it's not a fair comparison. A fairer comparison would be to compare something like ECS and Docker Swarm, or ECS and EKS, or exactly. Which are the common ones. It's containers or containers with more work. It would be the comparison there. But yeah, it feels like, I don't know, because the guy that wrote it is allegedly 3 times certified and should know better. So it feels like a really kind of iffy way of forcing a comparison to me.
Well, I guess there must be people out there asking this question. Otherwise, he would not have felt the need to answer it. There must be people who are confused about the difference between ECS and Fargate and how they interoperate.
Oh, I've definitely had those sorts of conversations the other way around. Isn't this meant to be an ECS app? Yes. What are all these EC2s doing then? Running the ECS app. That was the capacity provider. That's where it's come from. So I guess I'd have just probably done it slightly differently, but maybe I will.
Yeah, there you go. Write a reply to the blog post and answer the real question, I guess. But so let's move on, because there's not a huge amount to talk about on that one, to our final article for this week. This is an article on dev.to by AWS hero Faye Ellis, former cloud guru, but I think she's still a cloud guru, but they're not called that anymore, are they? Plural.
She's also a former community builder, because she got accepted into the CB program, and then I think about 6 months later got named as a hero. So okay.
So when I had my SysOps administrator, I let it expire. Sadly, I don't still have it, but it was Faye's training that I watched to get me through the certification. But she's written this article about how the exam has evolved. So it's no longer SysOps administrator. It's now the CloudOps. Is it CloudOps engineer? Yeah. So it's now, it used to be the AWS certified SysOps administrator associate. It's now evolved into the AWS certified CloudOps engineer associate. So she's talking through the differences and what to expect in the exam. So I don't think you've actually done this one, have you, John? You've got the old SA.
I've got the old one.
SOA CO2, which is the one that I had.
I've got the old one.
Which did in itself have quite an interesting evolution back in the day when it started to include some labs, but I missed out on that because that came after I had certified.
And before I did,
because I didn't recertify. So
they
took it away again,
and then they got rid of them again because I think they couldn't make them work reliably or something like that.
Right.
That felt like it was reactionary to some of the Azure exams that had labs that you had to go through. It felt like it was reactionary so that you weren't just always doing like click, check, multiple options and all that kind of thing. It was a bit more practical, but I think they just couldn't make it work reliably.
So the purpose of this post really is just to draw comparisons between the old exam, which I think has been retired. Has it been retired?
So it's interesting because because I think this is the first time an exam's been renamed, but it's still got the same exam code. as it were, right? Because that's not a thing that I've been aware of that has happened before. They've flat retired exams. Like, I don't think you can do the SAP one anymore, and some of the big data stuff I think has gone. They've flat retired exams and brought completely different ones out with different codes. Fine, that makes sense. This case, they've changed from SysOps to CloudOps. Fine, but it's on the same code because it was SOACO2 and now it's SOACO3, but it's different. And I guess the point there is I will still hold SysOps as and when I renew my DevOps engineer. Yeah, because it sits above it. I won't be granted the CloudOps one though. I don't know if I'll be able to hold both at the same time. So if I go and do CloudOps, and I might, because apparently it's a very similar sort of exam. If you go and read Faye's very good article, passing score is still the same. Topics are much the same, but they've been just kind of rejigged a little bit. So there's 5 categories instead of 6, and they've munged, I think, the costs just across the rest of them and kind of mushed some bits around. So fine, okay, I imagine I'll go and do that at some point. But yeah, so as and when I renew my DevOps exam next year at some point, assuming I go and do it, as I understand it, I'll still hold a SysOps exam. I won't hold a CloudOps exam because I haven't passed CloudOps. I've passed SysOps. But SysOps is retired, but it'll still renew from the DevOps one, I think. You can't go and retake SysOps because that's dead. You can't do that anymore. You'd have to go take CloudOps. But I think my SysOps would renew, which I'm very confused about how that would work.
Well, only one way to find out. And it's not fight, but yeah.
Yes, I'm going to have to go and take this one as well, I think. And then I can say I've got both.
See what happens, yeah.
Who did we have this conversation with? Was it Nicholas, a gold jacket holder, who was having this kind of debate as to, do you need to pass this one and hold that one now? Like, how's that going to work?
What, to retain the gold jacket status? Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Yeah, interesting. So there are. She does go on to talk about some new AWS services to know, which I guess some of these didn't even exist when the SysOps Administrator exam was first created. So you've got things like Amazon Managed Service for Prometheus and Grafana, AWS Network Firewall. ECS existed, I think, in ECR, but I don't think Prometheus did. IMIDC is relatively new, I think.
Newish, yeah.
Yeah, EKS existed before as well, but so yeah, all in all, it's a pretty good article, just sort of highlighting how the exam has evolved. So
yeah, I still don't get why they rebranded it though. I don't get it. I think maybe it's because SysOps Administrator had this kind of sysadmin connotation to it, like sysadmin for the cloud, and that's not really a thing anymore because previously it didn't have, as far as I know, it didn't have anything about things like infrastructure code, so CloudFormation, CDK, Terraform, that kind of thing. It didn't have anything about that. That was covered by the dev associate exam because that was in there, and to an extent it's in the solutions architect one. It's definitely in the DevOps one, but yeah, it feels like they've just rejigged it slightly, and I wonder if it's going to follow with a rejig of the dev associate exam.
Very possibly. It's the world of dev and ops colliding, as it has been for a decade or so. But yeah, I guess the previous one was more about deploying servers on the cloud, and obviously that's less what the cloud is about these days. So
I don't know. You look at Amazon's bottom line; it's definitely still about that.
Well, without servers, nothing else will run. But it's the layers of obfuscation, layers of abstraction between us and the servers. Anyway, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for Season 4, Episode 35 of Logicast. Short and sweet this week because we didn't have any input from a guest, but we will, of course, be back next week with another guest for you from the AWS community. So thank you, John, for sharing your insights today, and great to hear that you're back on the DIY, and good luck with replacing your extractor fan without falling through the ceiling or inhaling any fiberglass fibers.
If I'm not here next week, I'm hacking up fiberglass.
Yeah, we know why. Exactly. Yeah, DIY gone wrong. Either that or he's been kicked somewhere else in a karate match. So John does like to live dangerously outside of work. But there we are. So yes, that is the end of our time for season 4, episode 35 of Logicast. If you've enjoyed it, do tell your friends. We are available to download from wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to see what it says in the little white boxes underneath our names, then check out our video feed on the Logicata YouTube channel. We'll be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.